Hey, it's episode 15. This week we've got stereo enhancing plugins. Do I use them? How do I use them and why? How to mix pianos for dense heavy mixes, program drums, and whether or not you need two sets of monitors in your studio.
3, 2, 1. This is the Ask JV Show.
Our first question comes from Christian. I've been thinking a lot about stereo enhancement plugins lately. Do you use them yourself? Which ones and when in the mixing process?
Cool question. I don't think we've touched on that at all yet so far in the show. Yeah, I do use stereo enhancers, stereo widening plugins in the mix, but only for key spots. So usually what I'm using them for is lead guitars or lead vocals or background vocals. Occasionally, of course, on some other instruments, maybe some synth or key stuff, I'll throw it on there, but it's just part of my mix effects template that I have, and I import that into every mix. So it has an aux track that has my widener plugin. Right now I use the the Soundtoys Micro Shift, or the little Micro Shift, which is just kind of has 3 different harmonizer settings. So I can feed a mono signal to that, and then it will spit out left and right signals that are a little bit pitch shifted and a little bit delayed, so it gives it that wider sound. Before I had that plugin, I just used the stock pitch plugin in Pro Tools. Just had like the left side down a couple cents and the right side up a couple cents. Use that for a stereo, a harmonizer. So yeah, I use that for lead guitars and vocals. So usually on background vocals, actually, only if it's a genre specific thing, I'll use it on a lead vocal to kind of make it a little more produced sounding, a little less raw, a little more just kind of modern, polished. Sometimes that modern metalcore with the singing vocals, it can be nice on that. So that's when I use the stereo enhancing plugins.
Our second question comes from Horst. How do you mix electronic and acoustic pianos to make them cut through the mix, especially when they are the lead instrument?
This question is perfect right now because I'm literally in the middle of mixing a record that is it's guitar driven, but the piano is a really big part of it on this record. So it's full drums, bass, electric guitars, acoustic guitars, and then the piano that we've got to fit in there. So it can be a challenge for sure. In those cases, I would say lots of compression. Lots of EQ. Like often a natural sounding piano is fairly dark in the context of an aggressive rock mix. So lots of top end, 5K, 8K, even above. You could boost some 12K or whatever to get some air in there. Often you might have to boost a lot of like mid-range around 1K to get it to cut through over top of the guitars or at least compete with them. Cut out some low end so when you're not interfering with the bass and the low end of the guitars. And yeah, lots of compression and sometimes some drive and some distortion that you don't notice in the mix, but they just kind of, again, help with evening it off and add a little bit more compression and just give it more harmonic content to just really help it stay solid in the mix. So it can be a challenge for sure, but compression, don't be afraid to EQ, don't be afraid to push stuff in your mix. And it's something that I just emailed out the other day about not being afraid to push things in your mix. Oftentimes, people are afraid that they're doing too much or they're EQing too much or compressing too much in the mix, and chances are you're probably not doing enough. So again, don't listen to it in solo. Make sure if you're trying to get a piano to fit in with the mix, don't listen to it with the whole mix running as you're adding the EQ, as you're doing the compression, so that you know when you've got enough of it. Because if you just listen in solo, it's going to sound nice and natural and good, but it's going to get lost in the mix. So those are my tips for piano. And sometimes I should add, you might end up boosting kind of some weird frequencies to get it to cut through. So if you think of, bass and electric guitars, they're very heavy in the 1K, 2K area. So maybe you boost a little lower on the piano or different key tracks, maybe sometimes 700, 800 hertz, which you don't really boost often on a lot of instruments, but that could actually help it poke out of the mix because nothing else is being boosted there. So try that out as well.
Jake asks, have you had success with certain drum replacement software, such as Superior Drummer or Steven Slate drums, to the point that they're on a record?
Yeah, for sure. I've done a couple of records with those. I don't prefer it. I just like a natural drum sound, even if I record drums and end up replacing the kick, snare, and toms, and just leave the natural cymbals in there. Somehow it just still sounds better to me. But yes, I have done some records that have purely programmed drums on them. I've done Superior Drummer, and I think some people have sent me some stuff programmed with the Steven Slate drums, but I haven't actually personally used that one. But yeah, totally done that. The key is just spending time on the dynamics. The best programmed drums I ever got, the drummer for the band actually recorded them on a MIDI kit. So he was actually playing the electronic kit, capturing that MIDI, and then programming it off of that, which helps it to feel a little more natural. But yeah, you can definitely get away with that. My one suggestion would be to replace the kick and snare and maybe the toms too with some unique samples, because Superior Drummer, all the samples in there, they're overused. So you don't want anyone to know that those drums sound the same as such and such record, or I recognize those drum sounds. Try to, I always, if I get something sent to me that's programmed drums with Superior or whatever, or Steven Slate or anything, I'll always switch out the kick and snare and maybe the toms too with my own samples so that it still sounds unique. It sounds like my mix.
Our last question comes from Nathan. Do you really need 2 sets of monitors, speakers in a studio? What is your buffer size setting in your DAW when mixing?
Do you really need 2 sets of monitors? No, you don't need them. It helps. You can see right now behind me, I've only got my NS10 set up. That's just because I don't need my bigger speakers. I have Yamaha HS80s, which are a bit bigger, and they go down a bit lower. I have those. They're just sitting in my basement right now. But yeah, you don't need them. I used to have the NS10s and the HS80s in my old studio, and I would use the HS80s for tracking, just because they're a little more pleasant to listen to, and you can crank them up a little bit louder. And usually when I'm tracking instruments, I'm listening way louder than when I'm mixing. So I think it's helpful to have kind of a bigger, louder, kind of fuller range monitor for when you're tracking stuff, so you can have it loud, get the energy in the room. And then something like the NS10s or something similar that's smaller, forces you to focus on the mid-range, something that's not very hyped. For mixing, I think is helpful. But if you're just mixing, sure, you can just have 1 set of monitors. That's what I got here. But you just got to know them really well and know how they translate, know how stuff is supposed to sound on those. And then maybe, you can always double check like I do in the car or on headphones or whatever. As far as my buffer size in Pro Tools, I don't know what it is now. It's something really low with my new setup, like 64 samples or something. I think with my HD rig, I usually kept it at 256, but it can be whatever it needs to be. It's not something that's important. All that matters is that your computer can handle it and doesn't seize up on you. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, you know the deal. Sign up on my email list if you're not part of that already. That's where I send out all of my best content. So just go to hardcoremusicstudio.com or click the link below the video here if you're on YouTube, and go grab my mixing cheat sheet and you'll be added to the list. And submit your questions at askjvpod.com, and I will see you on the next episode.